My sister Ruby, 22F, and I 25F, have never had a great relationship. We mostly just attend each other's events and keep up appearances for the sake of our family. But at her baby shower recently, she made some incredibly hurtful comments about my son, and I finally lost it. I ended up revealing that she's not even really my sister, something I've known for years but kept quiet about. Now everything has fallen apart, and my family is blaming me for it. I've gotten used to Ruby's snide remarks about my marriage over the years. I usually ignore them because I know she's just trying to get a reaction out of me. But recently, she dragged my son into it, and that was the last straw. For context, I have a 3-year-old son with my husband, but we only got married last year. I don't think it's as problematic or shameful as she makes it out to be. When I got pregnant, my husband and I had only been dating for about 6 to 7 months. Instead of rushing into marriage just because I was pregnant, we decided to take things slow and really get to know each other. Things worked out well. We kept dating throughout my pregnancy, he moved in after our son was born, and after living together for a while, we decided to get married last year. I don't see how any of this is Ruby's business, but she loves to make comments about it and paint me as some kind of immoral person just because I had a child before marriage. It's such an outdated mindset that I usually don't even dignify it with a response. Trust me, if she knew the truth about how she became part of our family, she would never have the audacity to talk to me this way. I accidentally discovered some things a couple of years ago, but by then Ruby had been part of our family her entire life, and my mom literally got down on her knees and begged me not to reveal her big secret. Out of respect for her, I kept quiet for a long time. But this time at the baby shower, I just couldn't hold back anymore. At the shower, after everyone had arrived and we were all mingling, Ruby stood very close to me with a group of her friends and started talking really loudly. She was telling them about how she had known her husband for 3 years before marriage and they waited 2 years before trying to get pregnant. After explaining her timeline, she started saying how she had planned her future very carefully because she wanted to make sure everything was on track and they didn't have any surprises, because the last thing she wanted was for her first child to be a mistake, since that would really derail her plans, and she didn't want to end up like certain people. I guess it's obvious why this was the last straw for me. Before this, at least she had kept her insults fairly tame and easy to ignore. But this wasn't like that. What she said was disgusting, and the implication that my son was a mistake who had derailed my life was not something I could let slide. Besides, my husband and son were right there beside me and had heard everything, which upset me even more. I snapped and addressed her directly, telling her she wouldn't be talking so much if she knew her own story. Then I just went for it before my mom could stop me. Honestly, I wasn't even thinking about how this would reflect on my mom because for so many years, even though I had kept her secret, she had never stood up for me or told Ruby to cut it out. That's how everyone found out that Ruby isn't actually my sister, she's my cousin, and my mom adopted her when she was 6 months old. The guests might not have found that so scandalous if that was the worst of it, but unfortunately, there was more. Ruby's real biological mother being my aunt was still manageable, but it was the identity of the father that really had people shocked. Ruby's dad, and a huge part of why my mom adopted her, was my mom's ex-boyfriend from high school, the only man she had dated before she met my dad. The cherry on top was that my mom had basically manipulated my father into adopting Ruby by telling him that her sister was just 22 and wasn't ready to take on the responsibility of being a mother. She made it seem like she was doing something very kind and noble, and that's how they ended up adopting Ruby. But the darker truth was that my mom just wanted an excuse to stay in touch with her ex. Until a couple of years back, I know for a fact that she was still in contact with him. I don't want to get into all the details, but basically, my mom and her ex broke up after high school, then she met my dad in college and married him after graduation. But I guess they never really got over each other, and soon enough her ex hooked up with my aunt, which is messy enough as it is. They were involved for a couple of months, and that's how my aunt ended up pregnant with Ruby. She wasn't ready for a child, so she asked my mom to adopt the baby. The problem was that my mom already had her hands full with me. I was 3 at the time, which is pretty young, and she wasn't ready for a second child. That's when her ex stepped in. He told her it was his baby and begged her, and she finally gave in. She somehow convinced my dad to adopt Ruby, and that's how she became part of our family. Obviously, I don't remember any of this because I was just 3 years old at the time. Even I had no clue that Ruby wasn't my biological sister or that she had been adopted. We were both raised believing we were bio sisters, and after my aunt passed away in a car accident 3 years after Ruby was born, there was nobody to contradict our parents. I found out the truth when my mom accidentally left her phone unlocked a couple of years ago, and I ended up reading some messages between her and her ex. At the time, I didn't know it was her ex, I just knew it was some guy asking about Ruby, talking about how much his daughter had grown up, and trying to grab lunch with my mom. He was also telling her to bring Ruby because he thought it was finally time for her to know the truth. My mom hadn't replied to those messages, but when I scrolled up, I saw that she had been in touch with this guy for a while. I found it very suspicious, so I confronted her about it, and that's how the entire story came out. My dad was aware that Ruby was his sister-in-law's daughter, but my mom had been very clever and excluded the fact that it was actually her ex's daughter as well. The two sisters had told my dad that some random guy from a one-night stand was the father, and that didn't raise any alarms with him, so he was blissfully unaware of everything until I brought it up at the baby shower. After I revealed all this, I decided to taunt Ruby about how she had made an even bigger mistake than my son, so she should probably look into her own life story first. It was intentional, I won't lie, and I knew it would cause a lot of trouble for everyone in my family, but honestly, I couldn't care less about it anymore. Right now, Ruby isn't speaking to our parents and has even rescinded their invitation to her wedding. When I left the baby shower, she was furious and having a hysterical temper tantrum. But I really didn't see my parents' divorce coming. Apparently, after the baby shower, my mom and dad got into a huge fight about the whole thing with her ex because, of course, he had no clue about that detail. For the past couple of years, even after I had found out about it, I hadn't breathed a word about the ex because my mom had promised me she had nothing going on with him. She even told me that the only reason she had responded to him recently was that he had been pestering her for months about Ruby, and being a parent herself, she didn't think it was right to continue ignoring him. Apart from that, she told me that whatever feelings she had for him at the beginning of her marriage were gone, and now all she loved and valued was my dad. For the sake of that, I kept her secret. But now I don't think I should care anymore because clearly, they didn't care about me, which is why they never stood up for me when Ruby was blatantly insulting and humiliating me in public. My mom is going out of her way right now to pin everything on me. She's been sending me text after text telling me that I've ruined everything for her because her daughter isn't speaking to her, and her husband has moved out and is demanding a divorce, all because she tried to do something good for her sister. She's claiming that my a little ego-driven outburst ruined everything. Believe it or not, I do feel a little guilty because it's true that her life is pretty much in shambles right now, and that's just because I lost my temper. None of my friends or my husband thinks I did anything wrong, but I still feel like I need to get a second opinion. AITA for revealing my mom's secrets and ruining her life out of anger? Update 1. Hi everyone, thanks for all the comments and support. It's been a week since the baby shower incident, and I wanted to give you all an update on what's been happening. First off, my sister Ruby is still not speaking to anyone in the family, but they only have themselves to blame for that. My parents are both upset with me, especially my mom. A couple of days ago, my dad finally sent over divorce papers. He's been living separately ever since their fight at the baby shower. Until yesterday, I hadn't blocked my mother, so she kept messaging me constantly. Her messages have gotten increasingly hostile and manipulative. She's been telling me that she never thought her own daughter could betray her like this, and that I'm just like her ex, cruel and selfish. She's even started bringing up every sacrifice she claims to have made for me growing up, saying I've always been ungrateful and that this proves it. What really got to me was when she started messaging my husband's family. She reached out to my mother-in-law, trying to paint me as an unstable person who makes up stories for attention. Fortunately, my mother-in-law knows exactly what kind of person I am and has been incredibly supportive through all of this. The extended family has split into camps. My mom's side of the family is, predictably, taking her side. They're saying I should have kept quiet about ancient history, and that I've destroyed a happy family over petty sibling rivalry. My dad's family, on the other hand, is furious with my mom. They've been calling and texting me, saying they always suspected something was off about Ruby's adoption but never could put their finger on it. One of my aunts from my dad's side actually revealed something interesting. Apparently, my mom had tried to reconnect with her ex several times during the first few years of her marriage to my dad. This was before Ruby was even born. My aunt had caught them having lunch together once but kept quiet about it because she didn't want to cause problems. Now she feels guilty for not speaking up sooner. My husband has been my rock through all of this. He tells me that watching Ruby belittle me and our son for years while my parents did nothing was a form of emotional abuse, and that I shouldn't feel guilty for finally standing up for myself. He's right, I've spent years trying to keep the peace, protecting people who never protected me. Yesterday, I finally made the decision to block my mom on everything. The constant barrage of guilt-tripping messages was starting to affect my mental health, and I need to focus on my own family now. My husband pointed out that I've been having trouble sleeping and being present with our son because I'm so stressed about all this drama. Some of Ruby's friends have reached out to me, surprisingly. Turns out she had been making similar nasty comments about other people's life choices to them as well. They said they always felt uncomfortable with her judgmental attitude but didn't know how to call her out on it. Finding out about her own complicated family history has apparently made them see her behavior in a new light. One thing that's been really eye-opening is going through old family photos with my new perspective. There are so many moments where I can now see the tension I missed as a kid, the way my mom would position herself between Ruby and my dad in photos, how she always seemed to favor Ruby's interests over mine, the strange way she would get defensive whenever anyone commented on how different Ruby and I look. My therapist, yes, I started seeing one this week, says I'm processing years of complicated family dynamics all at once, and that it's normal to feel overwhelmed. She's helping me understand that while the truth came out in an explosive way, it probably would have come out eventually. Ruby's biological father had already been pushing for her to know the truth. I've been focusing on creating a peaceful environment at home for my son. He's too young to understand what's happening, but kids can pick up on tension. My husband and I have been making extra effort to have fun family time and maintain his normal routine. Watching him play and laugh reminds me that breaking free from all this toxic family drama is the right thing for his future. For those asking about my dad, he's staying with his brother right now. He did try to call me once, but it was just to lecture me about family loyalty and how I should have come to him privately instead of causing a scene. I told him he had years to notice how Ruby treated me and do something about it, but he chose to look the other way. He didn't have much to say to that. To everyone who commented saying I did the right thing, thank you. Your support has helped me stay strong in my decision to prioritize my own family's well-being over keeping toxic family secrets. I'm done being the family scapegoat while Ruby gets away with treating people horribly. I know this situation isn't fully resolved yet, but I feel lighter having cut off contact with my mom. For the first time in years, I'm not constantly walking on eggshells or trying to predict when the next nasty comment about my life choices will come. Does anyone have experience with maintaining boundaries with toxic family members while still allowing for possible reconciliation in the future? I'm not ready to even think about that right now, but I wonder if it's something I should consider down the line. Update 2. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and my dad finally reached out to me today. Up until now, he hadn't spoken to me directly, but I knew he was blaming me for everything thanks to his relatives who had been texting me about how disappointed they were in my behavior. When he first called, I had no interest in speaking to him. But he kept calling from different numbers after I blocked his main one. When I finally answered, his tone was immediately confrontational. He said that after everything I'd done, the least I could do was answer his calls and be civil. He then said he didn't expect an apology from me because I was clearly my mother's daughter, but he still expected me to let him see his grandson. Under normal circumstances, I might have agreed just to keep the peace. But something about his entitled attitude and the way he was trying to guilt-trip me just set me off. I told him flat out that I wasn't going to let my son see anyone from this family anymore because they were all spineless and stupid. Before he could argue, I hung up. But when I got home from picking up my son from my mother-in-law's, she watches him while my husband and I are at work. My dad was waiting outside our house. I couldn't avoid him because my son spotted him immediately and ran to him excitedly. My dad picked him up, and they played together while we stood there awkwardly outside my house. After a few minutes, I asked my son to go inside and get cleaned up, so I could talk to my dad privately. I told him that my son was being nice because he's just a child who doesn't understand what's going on, but I'm not a child anymore, and everyone in this family has really hurt me. I asked him to leave. He got angry and said my behavior made no sense because he was the one who had been betrayed the most, not only by his wife but by me too. He said the least I could do was pretend to be apologetic, even if I didn't mean it. The way I was acting like I had nothing to be sorry about was making him question whether he and my mother had raised me correctly at all. That's when I really lost it. I told him that if he felt betrayed, that's how I had been feeling for many years. My behavior now was just a culmination of those feelings, and if he didn't approve, tough luck, because I learned to behave this way from my parents. Throughout the past several years, they had expertly turned a blind eye to Ruby, constantly humiliating me at every opportunity, and nobody had the audacity to say anything to her. But suddenly, just because I spilled a few family secrets, I'm the villain? I reminded him how upset I had been when Ruby made that comment about my son being a mistake at the baby shower, and even then, nobody had stood up for me or my son. I told him to save his act about really loving his grandson for someone who would believe it. I said I didn't doubt that my parents loved my son, everyone does, because he's just a kid and easy to love, but at the end of the day, I knew Ruby's future children would probably mean more to them than my son. Besides, I pointed out, if he couldn't even bring himself to defend his grandson when he was being called a mistake to his face, then he had no business overriding my boundaries and showing up uninvited to see him now. That was all I had to say, and he seemed stunned into silence. I walked to my door and shut it. I thought he might try to come inside to see my son again, but when I looked through the window a few minutes later, he was gone. When my husband came home and I told him about the confrontation, he said this had been a long time coming. He pointed out how my parents love to pretend they're the victims in this situation, but in reality, I'm the one who has been hurt day after day, and they never cared. He made me realize that this expectation that I should always be a good daughter and put my family before myself had been drilled into my head subconsciously, but I'm breaking free from it now. I've already dealt with my father and made it clear that I'm not interested in speaking to him anymore, and if my mom tries to contact me again, she'll hear the same thing. For now, though, I think she's keeping her distance, probably because she's busy with the divorce proceedings. My husband suggested we take a short family vacation next month, just the three of us, to get away from all this stress and focus on being happy together. I think that's exactly what we need right now. Update 3, it's been close to a month since I last spoke to anyone from my family, and that was my dad. After our last confrontation, he's had the good sense to stay away. Ruby and I have obviously had no contact since the baby shower, and I don't think any of us are worse off for it. After I blocked my mom on everything, she kept her distance for a while. But a few days ago, I started receiving messages from anonymous accounts on Facebook. At first, they were just general hate messages calling me horrible names and saying I was worthless. Initially, I thought it might be someone playing a cruel prank, but I know none of my friends would do something like that. It didn't occur to me at first that it might be my mom, it seemed too far-fetched. But now I'm convinced it is her because last night, my husband told me he'd been receiving messages all day from the same accounts. The twist is that they weren't insulting him directly. Instead, they were telling him terrible things about me, including accusations of infidelity and other inappropriate behavior. My mom has taken it to a whole new level by claiming I've been unfaithful to my husband and spreading other vicious lies. Obviously, none of it is true, she's just trying to get under our skin and possibly destroy my marriage. As soon as we figured out it was likely my mom, we started seeing the whole thing as pathetic rather than hurtful. I feel ashamed to even be associated with this woman anymore. This is my mother we're talking about, she's in her 50s, for crying out loud. This isn't the kind of behavior someone her age should be engaging in. And for what? Just because she hates me for exposing her secrets? It's sad and pathetic, and it really confirms that I didn't do anything wrong by revealing her true nature to everyone. I don't even understand what she hopes to achieve with this. She's just being hateful for no reason, and it's a waste of her time and energy. If we wanted to, we could report her and put an end to this, but honestly, that would be a waste of our time and energy because we really don't care anymore. This reflects badly on her, not us. It's clear she's taken everything that's been happening really hard because this is some juvenile nonsense she's pulling. I wish I could say I was upset or angry about this, but I just feel sorry for her. I can't believe this is what my mother has been reduced to. My husband pointed out something interesting. He said her behavior now proves that she's always been manipulative, we just didn't see it because she was better at hiding it before. He's right. Looking back, I can see how she always tried to control narratives and manipulate situations to her advantage. The only difference now is that she's lost control and is lashing out obviously instead of subtly. The most shocking part about all of this is that she's not just targeting us anymore. She started sending similar anonymous messages to my husband's family and some of our mutual friends, trying to turn them against me. Fortunately, everyone knows exactly where these messages are coming from and can see through her desperate attempts to cause trouble. My mother-in-law suggested we document everything in case we need to take legal action, but for now, we're just ignoring it. My husband says engaging with her in any way would just give her the attention she's seeking. We're focusing on our own happiness instead. Update 4. It's been a couple of months since my last update, and today I heard from my aunt that my parents finalized their divorce last week. I was attending a cousin's engagement party, one of the first family events I've been to since the baby shower. I was skeptical about going because I thought I might run into my parents or worse, Ruby, but I had to attend because this cousin and I are close. When my aunt told me that neither of my parents were attending and Ruby had already declined the invitation, I felt comfortable enough to stay longer. She ended up telling me a lot about what's been happening with the family that I hadn't known about since cutting contact. Apparently, the divorce proceedings were particularly messy because my mom tried to claim that my dad had always known about Ruby's biological father, which was obviously a lie. She even tried to paint herself as the victim, saying she only kept in touch with her ex for Ruby's sake. Nobody believed her, of course, especially after all her recent behavior with the anonymous messages and harassment. What surprised me most was learning that Ruby has completely cut ties with both parents. According to my aunt, she's been telling people that her entire life has been a lie and she doesn't know who to trust anymore. Part of me feels sympathy for her. Finding out your whole identity is different from what you thought must be traumatic. But then I remember all the years of her cruel behavior, and my sympathy diminishes considerably. My aunt also told me that my dad really misses his grandson. I've been thinking about possibly letting him see my son occasionally. Not because I want to fix things with him, but because I know my son misses his grandpa too. Out of all his grandparents, he had the closest relationship with my dad, and he still asks about him sometimes. I'm considering setting up very controlled, supervised visits, maybe meeting at a public park for an hour every few weeks. My husband thinks it might be okay, as long as we set strict boundaries and make it clear that this is only about my son, not about rebuilding our relationship. We're still discussing the details and haven't made a final decision yet. The engagement party itself was interesting because it was the first time I've been around extended family since everything happened. Most people were surprisingly supportive, saying they respected me for having the courage to expose the truth. A few older relatives tried to suggest that I should forgive my mother for the sake of family, but I shut that down quickly. One of my cousins shared an interesting perspective. She said that watching me stand up to my family has inspired her to address some toxic dynamics in her own relationships. It made me realize that sometimes doing what's right for yourself can have a positive impact on others too. Looking ahead, I'm focusing on creating the kind of family environment I wish I'd had growing up. My son will never have to wonder if he's less loved than anyone else, and he'll never be made to feel like his existence was a mistake. My husband and I are building our own traditions and making sure our home is filled with love and honesty. Thank you to everyone on Reddit who has supported me through this journey. Your advice and encouragement helped me stay strong when I doubted myself, and your shared experiences showed me I wasn't alone. Sometimes it takes strangers on the internet to help you see what your own family can't, that you deserve respect and happiness.